Greetings, my friends. We are all interested in the Plan 9x9 podcast, for that is where you and I are going to spend the next hour of our lives. And remember, my friends, podcasts such as these are made possible by listeners like these. Anthony Wendell, Andrew Campbell, Karen Joan Kahodek, and let us not forget Jeremy Lamastus. Let us punish the guilty. Let us reward the innocent. My friends, can your hearts stand the Plan 9x9 podcast?
For the first time, we are bringing to you the full story of what happened.
What plan will you follow now?
Plan 9. It's been absolutely impossible to work through these Earth creatures. Their soul is too controlled.
Why do I get hooked up with these spook details? Monsters, graves, bodies.
Oh, all right.
Well, it was covered up by the higher echelon.
I am a soldier of our planet. We did not come here as enemies. We came only with friendly intentions, to talk, to ask your aid for the whole universe. But your governments of Earth refused even to accept our existence.
Flying saucers, Captain, are still a rumor.
Now toddle off and fly your flying machine, darling. But if you see any more flying saucers, will you tell them to pick another house to buzz?
Minutes later, the police arrived at the scene.
Who found them?
The man and girl. The morgue wagon ought to be along most any time.
You get their statement?
Yeah, they're pretty scared.
Finding a mess like this ought to make anyone frightened.
You believe there are such things as flying saucers, Colonel?
Tell you one thing, if a little green man pops out at me, I'm shooting first and asking questions later.
You realize there's a government directive stating that there is no such thing as a flying saucer.
You're a headstrong young man.
Those incidents in the graveyard these past few days just got me worried.
Don't like hearing noises, especially when there ain't supposed to be any. Yeah, sort of spooky-like.
Shall we talk now or wait?
Go ahead, my friend.
We're here for part 4, Plan 4 of the Plan 9x9 podcast. As before, I'm still Derek M. Koch, and I'm still joined by my regular co-host,
Scott Morris.
That's right. And Scott, we've got another guest this week.
Awesome.
Do you want to introduce him, or shall I? Or shall he introduce himself?
Let's put it on the guest.
Okay. Who are you, sir, and what are you doing here?
This is Kenny Blose, and I'm here to enjoy this great podcast. I'm excited to be here for Plan 4 of Plan 9.
That's right, man. Plan 9x9 podcast welcomes Kenny Blose to the show. He is a regular contributor to Monster Kid Radio with his amazing Famous Monsters of Filmland segment, where he talks about how whatever movie we're talking about that week on MKR was represented in that iconic magazine. He's also been a guest in the past, but not recently. We're going to have to correct that, man. We'll talk after we're done recording.
All right.
And Kenny, you made mention saying that Plan 4, one of the little things that we're doing as we bring guests on this show is everybody knows what Plan 9 was, and that was to raise the Earth's dead. What do you think one of the other 8 plans were?
Wow, that's a tough one. Well, I don't know. I guess it would be to drive us crazy with insane laughter, because they are really funny. These aliens, they are.
Hey, that works for me.
I like that one.
There we go. We have been asking every guest what they thought it was, and we didn't give them any warning. So right off the top of your head, that's great. I love it.
Right, that's the top of my head.
There we go.
And then once we get all the way through here, Derek and I are going to reveal what we think one of the first 8 plans were.
But we're not going to tell each other we're going to ask that question ahead of time, so that it's all a surprise.
Yes. We're really hoping that after the Plan 8 before Plan 9, we both get amnesia, so it'll be a surprise for us.
Now, you guys, that's no fair. You guys got a lot of time to think about it.
Yep. Our show, our rules.
That's right. Our show that was only made possible thanks to people like Kenny. So big shout out to you, sir, for supporting the show.
Very big thank you.
Yeah, it's a privilege to be able. I thank you for putting it out to us to support the show. You know, you are a friend, Derek, and your show Monster Kid Radio is just a special couple hours of my week every week, and I enjoy it so much, and I wanted to help you out. And being able to come on with you, that side benefit's just great, because I like being on the show too.
So before we actually start talking about the segment that we're talking about this time around, Kenny, when was the first time you saw Plan 9 from Outer Space?
I've been thinking about this for a while since I decided to do this, and I really think I saw it for the first time after I had seen the movie Ed Wood. Now, I had been a monster kid all my life, and I don't remember ever coming up. I remember reading about it being the worst film ever made, about the Golden Turkey Award and all that. But I don't really remember seeking it out and watching it until after I had seen the movie Ed Wood, which was in the mid-'90s. Once I had seen that, I was like, wow, I want to see this movie and see how bad it really is. And I had a good time. I have not seen it on Mystery Science Theater. I just watched the riff tracks this year. Other than that, I saw it, and then I watched it maybe 2 or 3 times after I'd seen it, after I saw Ed Wood. I don't know the exact time. I know I saw it on video, probably VHS, and I've loved it ever since.
How many times have you watched it since, do you know?
Say probably like maybe 5 times.
And have you purchased a copy of Ed Wood?
I have it. I actually got the iTunes colorized version. I actually purchased it.
Of Ed Wood, not Plan 9.
Ed Wood. Ed Wood. No, I have not. I have only watched that once, and I never got a copy of it, and I haven't seen it since. But,
being as a Disney stockholder, I was going to thank you if you actually purchased that movie, since that is a Disney movie.
Oh, okay. Oh my! Come on! After what he said about Boris Karloff in that movie, that should not be a Disney movie. I'm sorry.
Well, we all love Plan 9 from Outer Space for different reasons, I'm sure, or multiple reasons, whatever. We love the film. And we are excited to talk about minutes 27 through 36 in this episode of the Plan 9 by 9 podcast. And we like to try to give a brief breakdown as to what people can expect in this section of the film. Not get too in depth, but the piece does begin with Jeff and his Paula. Isn't it Paula's wife?
Yep, Jeff Trent and his wife Paula.
And he's going off to work and wants to make sure Paula is okay, staying home by herself. There's a little bit of back and forth and bickering about staying locked up and making sure the side door is locked.
Because there's been a lot of weird things going on in and above the graveyard that they live next to.
I still chuckle about the whole living next to a graveyard thing, but that actually gets referenced in the film, because when Jeff gets to work and they're all up in the air, there's a conversation had between the 2 pilots and the flight attendant, who makes a comment about how I told you kids not to move in next to that cemetery.
I read about that cemetery business. I tried to get you kids not to buy too near one of those things. We get there soon enough as it is.
He thought it'd be quiet and peaceful there.
That's Danny as the co-pilot, and Edith is our stewardess.
I got the impression they were all kind of the same age.
That, and also on the same crew, because they know each other really well.
But the whole I told you kids not to do this kind of made me question that for a moment. But then I'm also realizing what kind of movie we're watching, by who, and maybe the whole continuity thing, age thing wasn't really high on the priority list. Just saying. Anyway, they're all up in the air, and we have probably my favorite bit from this segment.
Hey, Edie, how about you and me balling it up in Albuquerque?
That's Danny, the co-pilot, hitting on the stewardess, Edith. And her response is my favorite when she says,
We land in Albuquerque at 4 a.m. That's strictly a 9 o'clock town.
So they're up in the air doing their thing. Back on Earth, on the ground, Paula is sleeping, and apparently she did not lock all the doors, because one character played by 2 people do manage to make their way into the home.
The dead old man.
Who doesn't really have a name. He's just called the dead old man. But we also see that character played by, was it the chiropractor?
Ann Wood's wife's chiropractor?
Sure.
I wonder if that guy ever owned up to what he's done and has been gone to a convention or something. I'd like to meet the guy.
Ooh, yeah.
There's a autograph that would be well sought after by people like us.
Tom Mason was the man's name, and he apparently appeared in a couple of other films. At least one, I guess. For Ed Wood, he appears in Night of the Ghouls as well. This isn't the first time we see Tom Mason. We saw him earlier in the film, but I do get a kick out of the cutting back and forth between Lugosi walking around and then Mason walking around, and then back and forth, back and forth. All the stuff that happens inside the home is Tom Mason, or I guess we can assume it is because he covers his face most of the time.
I did what I'm famous for doing, like a shot-by-shot analysis of Harryhausen films, and I did one for Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I did a little shot-by-shot analysis here and figured out that in this segment, this 9 minutes, we see Bela Lugosi for 47 seconds.
Wow. I'll take as much Lugosi as I can get, even if it's only 47 seconds in this segment. Although I do wonder, Ken, have you looked at the entire film to calculate how much is Bella versus how much is Tom?
No, I have not done. I've been thinking about doing that, but I have not done that yet.
Okay.
So I just did a little quick one today just to see in our 9 minutes how much of Lugosi we actually saw.
Well, as the Internet Movie Database calls this character, the ghoul man with cape over face chases Paula out of the house into the graveyard, and we get one of the most infamous scenes from this film that was recreated in Ed Wood. It's Inspector Clay rising from the dead, and I love it.
I actually think that this scene with Tor Johnson is very, very effective. I really like the lighting on it and the way that the grave falls in, as if like the coffin's opening up and it's the dirt's going in. If you just would see that scene by itself without all the craziness around it, you would actually think this is from a good, frightening movie. It was a pretty frightening scene.
I feel like in Ed Wood, they really play it up for laughs, but I don't know if they needed to. I mean, there's really not a moment in here that seems so incompetent. It's a great artistic shot.
I have to argue just slightly with that last statement. Because the very last shot, when they show the open grave after Clay is left, the falling of the tombstone looks really fake.
Okay.
Yeah, that part of it, no. Yeah, I agree with Scott on that one. But all the parts with Tor in there, and I think even Tor's makeup is actually pretty good. It's interesting on the colorized version I've been looking at. It looks really good with the contact lenses or whatever they had in his eyes. With the colorized version, it looks really creepy.
Oh, I agree. His makeup is awesome.
Now, we also get Vampira in this scene as well with that waist that I swear I could probably put my hand around. They really play it up in this sequence.
I'm beginning to wonder, does she interact with anybody else in the cast at any time in this movie?
There are scenes with her and Tor together, but they don't really...
That's true. That's about it. Yeah.
Well, in this 9-minute segment, I don't think we actually see her and anybody else in the same shot, do we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's all close-up of her, close-up of Tor, the back of Tom Mason's head, close-up of her, And they chase Paula Trent out of the cemetery into the street, which I assume is supposed to be shot day for night, but not really darkened to make it look like night. And she passes out and is picked up by some passerby. Tor Johnson and Vampira are staring at the scene, and he just picks her up and whisks her away.
He obviously knows her.
Yeah.
Because he calls her by name.
And then we get to have some of our favorite police officers in all of film show up at the cemetery.
These guys make the Keystone Cops look like the best cops ever.
Oh, these guys are great, though. Come on.
They are. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they're incompetent.
And one of them is Paul Marco, who is very well known in Ed Wood circles. I believe, didn't he have a cameo in the Ed Wood film itself?
I believe so. I would have to double check. Mm-hmm. It's been a while.
But Paul Marco, he plays patrolman Kelton, and Kelton turns up in a couple of the other films as well. So Paul Marco was part of Ed Wood's group, I guess you would say, his troupe. This segment pretty much ends with them getting out of the car, talking about the cemetery, and that's about it.
I had a few comments going back right at the beginning, what I call dopey dialogue.
I was going to bring that up. Before we started recording, Kenny sent Scott and I a list of dopey dialogue moments, and I'm eager to get into them.
The first thing that Paula says,
"If you're especially nice, I may even lock the side door.
And be sure you keep the yard lights on."
What does that mean? How is he going to be nice? He's going to work. He's going to be in the airplane. How does it make him better? How does it help him for her to lock her side door? And obviously, if she did lock that side door, she forgot some other door. But I just thought that was a hilarious line. If you're especially nice, I may even lock the side door. As he's getting in the car and leaving. So he doesn't really have an opportunity to be nice. So she mustn't have locked that door.
And along those lines, when he gets into the car to leave, didn't really occur to me to really notice this until we started watching this movie in these 9-minute chunks. Why does he get into the one passenger side and slide over? Why don't he just walk around to the driver's side to get into the car? Is that a set thing? They didn't have room for him to walk around the car. They didn't want to move the camera around. It just seemed awkward to me.
I think there's another moment similar to that when stand-in for Lugosi is in Paula's room. She runs out, and instead of turning around right after her, he does like a full turn, obviously to hide the fact that it isn't Lugosi. I think it's all probably Ed Wood yelling at them, get in that door, don't go around. True. It's going to look bad. It's going to take too long, something like that.
No, it's probably like, I don't have enough film to start and stop. We just need to keep it going. Just get in the car.
That's true. Probably saved a little bit of time, maybe. Anyway, what else do you have on your list there, Kenny?
I got a real kick out of the low-tech airplane that they're in. So the steering wheels, which they don't actually hold, so they must have a pretty good automatic pilot on those old planes. I didn't know they had that technology back then. And then in the back, when you go into a real airplane, even in the older days, there was all kinds of knobs and dials and things. But here, what do we have? We have on one side a clipboard. And on another side, it was something I looked at and I said, that looks like some kind of slide rule, a circular slide rule. And I thought, well, I never even heard of that, but that's what it looks like it might be. So guess what? I looked it up and I found the Slide Rule Museum. Yes, sliderulemuseum.org.
Wow.
And I went through all these different slide rules, and I specifically said circular slide rule, and there's a bunch of them. And I found one. The one that most closely resembles the one here we see in Plan 9 from Outer Space is the Search Slow slide rule. And this design was developed for the U.S. Army Coastal Artillery in the pre-World War II period. And that's what we're seeing there. It's a slide rule, and how you use it or what it's used for, those complex mathematical things that you could do a slide rule. I never learned how to use one. I'm from the age of the calculators. But that's what we're seeing back there. So their plane is well equipped. I got a kick out of that. And it's obviously like a shower curtain that keeps, the passengers from the crew. You got a little shower curtain there. Of course, we don't see those anymore.
Passenger manifest of 33 people? Is that what she says?
Yes. Yeah. And one thing I wanted to mention, referencing the shower curtain, the first time in this 9-minute section when Edith tries to get through it, she struggles to get through it because it catches on the clipboard that she's carrying. There's the conversation between the pilot and the co-pilot are going on, but if you watch the background, Edith has a really tough time getting through that shower curtain.
I'll have to go back and watch that. I didn't catch that one.
She does struggle quite a bit. I do like the moments in the cockpit, though, where they're talking, even before Edith and her clipboard show up, because it does seem like they're trying to develop their relationships between the people here, really kind of develop the characters.
That's about all you could say they're doing here, because there's really no reason for this scene to be here.
Yeah.
And that's what I figured, too. It must be some kind of character development. And you don't see that in modern movies today. It's nice, refreshing to see that in an old movie where you're learning a little bit about the characters of Edie and Silence and Mr. Trent. So that's what I guess this scene was for, because really it has nothing to do with the story.
Hey, Edie, how about you and me balling it up in Albuquerque?
Albuquerque? Have you read that flight schedule, boy?
Okay. Well, we know how that term is being used now, but I guess, that must have meant something else, I hope, because if that wouldn't have gotten by the censors in 1960.
Or the producers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Our Baptist producers. Oh, wow. They would have been up in arms about that one.
I figured it meant something like painting the town red or going out dancing, just having a good time.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I figured it was.
I looked it up, and it is dancing. It's about, going, it's like going to the ball, and it was considered somewhat a slang or a vulgar way of saying it, but it is basically dancing. The way that we think of that term, I haven't heard it used the way we think it's used for till recently. And I was trying to look up when did it start meaning what we think it means now, and I couldn't find anything about that. But I did find that originally, as a slang term, it was going out dancing.
That makes a lot more sense, and yeah, obviously I think we all knew it meant something different. But these days, hearing it, you still kind of catches you like, wait, what did he just say? So, yeah. I didn't think Ed Wood made those kind of movies until later in his career, you know? We talked about the dead old man wandering around in the woods, kind of replaying the same shot and sequence of shots over and over again. But Ed Wood works with what he had.
Like I said, 47 seconds of, if you take all the shots, there's a shot of him going in the house, very short, one coming out of the house, and then the cemetery shot. And I think it's probably one shot, and he just repeated certain sections of it. It reminds me of what Harryhausen would do with his special effects scenes. He would do a whole sequence, and then they would cut it up to make it look like it's longer. But it was like he was going to do one setup so that the lights would be the same, and then he would cut that into different shots and put reaction shots in between. That's kind of what Ed Wood did here. You know, he had that one shot of Bela Lugosi, and I think he cut it up to make it, to extend it out, to make it seem like he was the star of the movie.
Scott, do you realize what just happened here?
What just happened here?
Ed Wood just got compared to Ray Harryhausen.
Ray Harryhausen, yes.
And another thing I thought about with the editing of this, the editing of all this next scenes it was just they're going from Vampira to Tor to Bela Lugosi to the girl running, and they're like in the same cemetery, but they're never there together. It reminded me of the French New Wave, like Francois Truffaut, Jean-Luc Godard. They were famous for these jump cuts and for this crazy editing that didn't make any sense. And a lot of people consider that art. I think it's junk because it's boring. But here, I think it's art.
I think you're giving Ed Wood way too much credit.
Wow.
But I think here, he was it's not boring. It's fun.
I think he's just got... This is what I have on film. What can I do with it?
Well, who knows? Maybe that was Truffaut's idea. Maybe that was Godard's idea. And these crazy critics call it the new wave, and they make a big deal out of it when it was just they didn't have anything either. So I don't know.
Wow.
But I can't sit through a French New Wave movie. I appreciate the critic, for example, Leonard Maltin. I've had his books since 1980s, and I appreciate it. But his love of the French New Wave and the Italian neorealists and all that, I don't get it. And here, I can enjoy this, knowing that it's like Scott saying, he just was doing what he could. Yeah. But he was sincere, and it's never boring. So it was like a fun thing to see that.
That's very true. You could say lots of things about Ed Wood, but I always feel he's doing the best with what he's got.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's what comes through and what makes his movies fun to watch. You know, we might be laughing at him, but in a certain respect, we might be laughing with him. But he's sincere about it, and that sincerity comes through and makes the film interesting. You're not like a bad movie is not one that's as fun as this one can be. A bad movie is one that's just simply boring, and there have been a number of those too. And those don't make it onto a show like this because they're not fun. This movie's fun.
This is a lot of fun, and I have had even more fun with it now after we just learned that it's comparable to Ray Harryhausen and feels like a pseudo new French Wave film. So now this movie has been elevated even more. Wow.
I think I got a kick out of was that AstroTurf Cemetery.
Oh, man. We saw the groundskeepers earlier in the film. You don't think they can maintain a cemetery like that?
Well, watching it this time, it reminded me of Beetlejuice when they went down onto the model of the AstroTurf Cemetery. For some reason, it reminded me of Beetlejuice this time.
Which, the Ed Wood, Tim Burton connection.
I was going to say, now I'm comparing him to Tim Burton. So.
Yep.
Which I don't think Tim Burton would have a problem with, to be honest.
No, I don't think so either.
If Ed Wood had the money Tim Burton had to make his movie, I wonder how good it would be.
Oh, what if, man? What if? We always joke about if we had a time machine, we'd go back to do this or do that. I would use a time machine to go back to give Ed Wood $20. I mean, come on. Well, the cemetery is great. It has a wonderful model-like look. We talked about the Tor Johnson coming out of the grave, and that one shot with the light underneath him. I'm still saying that, and I agree with you, Kenny. It's awesome.
Yep, I think it stands out, and that's a picture that I think even in the first famous Monsters of Filmland, that underlit Tor Johnson was one of the first pictures that appeared in famous Monsters. Well, it was probably from another movie, but I think because, it hadn't been made yet, but that underlit Tor Johnson is frightening. If you would take that one shot and show that to a young kid, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to watch this. It's too scary. I think I would have been scared as a kid watching that. I've always been frightened by, the coming out of the grave shots in different movies. And I think this one works. I mean, that cheesy gravestone going in at the end, that I don't include that, but all the shots with with Tor Johnson, I think are effective. And I can imagine Ed Wood going, "We got it," with his thumbs up, and it's like, yes.
Perfect. Cut, print, move on. Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. The Tor Johnson thing, underlining his face like that in the makeup, there's a reason why Tor Johnson masks were so popular and sold so well over the years. There's a reason why we wanted to make sure we included an image of Inspector Clay in some of the rewards with our Kickstarter for this thing. I mean, he's just an iconic image. Even if people don't know it's from Plan 9 from Outer Space, I think people would still recognize it as an important image from classic science fiction and horror.
Yes, I agree.
So there's one thing that I noticed in this film, which was a first-time thing for me, and I don't know if it's been pointed out by other people on commentary tracks or riff tracks or anything like that. The bedroom scene where she's on the phone and then goes to bed and then pseudo Bela comes in, that could not have been shot all on the same day. I feel like that set was probably taken down or maybe redressed and then dressed again, because a picture on the wall changes between shots.
Actually, that picture on the wall changing was done on purpose by Legend Films.
That's why I never noticed it before.
I saw that same thing, and I didn't understand that. I thought that picture looks awfully modern.
Actually, Derek and I have already seen another shot where something similar to this has happened. It was during the death of Clay. But what happened when Legend Films was raising money to put out a colorized version of this film, they put up a couple of eBay auctions. And if you won these auctions, there was two out there. The one that Derek's referencing, you could have any picture you wanted inserted into the film. The other auction, you could have any name you wanted put on one of the gravestones. So when you see Paula lying there in bed, there's 3 pictures over her bed. If you're watching the Legends Films version of this, the middle one is some sort of landscape type picture at the beginning. And then there's one shot of her and there's a couple that's been superimposed into that picture. They're the people that won the eBay auction. And then it goes back to the chiropractor, and then it goes back to Paula, and it's back to the original picture.
So there's a reason why I haven't noticed it before until I watched the Legend Films version of this. Okay.
Yes.
Now I don't feel like what I just said a second ago is really relevant. I'm sure it was all shot on the same day. So thanks for making me look stupid, Riff Tracks and Legends people. I appreciate it. No, that's actually pretty cool. The movie's in the public domain, so do with it what you want, and that includes putting new pictures on the wall or new names on tombstones. Go for it. So just to cut in here real quick, I've been having some conversations with multiple people lately regarding the public domain status or lack thereof of Plan 9 from Outer Space. There are 2 schools of thought out there that I've been able to identify. One is that Plan 9 from Outer Space is, in fact, in the public domain. But there is another school of thought that it is actually owned by somebody. I'm not going to mention who, but if you do a little digging online, you can probably find it for yourself. But there is this line of thought that perhaps he owns the rights, and he's somebody who is alive and well today. Not related to Ed Wood himself, but somebody who did acquire the rights from a producer that was involved with the film, and the film was registered as having been a piece of work for hire, and it gets very, very complicated. I know over the years, Plan 9 from Outer Space has been released on various public domain collections, and while that doesn't necessarily mean that, yes, in fact, it is in the public domain, I do question whether or not it would turn up on so many it would turn up in so many public domain resources without being contested if it was not in the public domain. But I'm not a lawyer, and I can't speak for the person who says he has the rights to Plan 9 from outer space. This is something that I am personally very interested in. I can nerd out about copyright law and public domain and trademark and all of that for hours on end. I'm not going to do that here because that's not what the point of this podcast is. But yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I'm glad they
actually like that idea too.
I'm glad they went something subtle like this and they didn't go George Lucas on it and actually do big changes to it.
Yeah, I didn't even notice. I thought, oh, that's just part of the movie. And wow, did I see that? Let me back it up. So yeah, I didn't even think it was an addition. So
there's another scene that we've already, it was in one of the previous episodes, right after Clay gets mauled and they come across his body. There's a tombstone at his head. And on the original version, the tombstone, there's no readable text on it. But Legend actually put the text Paula and Russell on that tombstone.
Nice. A big chunk of this section of the film, there's no dialogue. It's just music. I don't even think there's sound effects. It's just music, isn't it? While Paul is being chased around in the cemetery and then out of the cemetery, nothing but soundtrack. Well, film score. Or library music, I guess, in this case with an Ed Wood film. But I still thought it was pretty effective. And I think if you had spent a lot of time doing a lot of Foley work, adding sound effects and all that, it might have taken away from some of the, dare I say, charm of Plan 9 from Outer Space.
I've heard other music, like the theme from Night of the Living Dead was also in Teenagers from Outer Space. And I've not heard this music before or after. I like you say, it's probably public domain library music that he had. But he used it, I think, pretty effectively for what he was trying to do.
Sure.
I think the music works.
Well, I think this music today is so iconically tied to Plan 9. I don't think another filmmaker would want to use it unless they were making reference to Plan 9. I mean, it would be like trying to use the Gonk today.
Oh.
Another piece of library music. You just couldn't do it unless you're referring to Dawn of the Dead.
I believe Howard Shore, when he did the score for Ed Wood, did incorporate elements of this music into what he was doing. But that was because it was Ed Wood. It was an homage. Exactly. It was intentional. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I have only come across 2 movies over the years that have used the same piece of library music. Totally not related to Plan 9, but there is a bit of library music from Monty Python and the Holy Grail that you can also hear in the film Curse of the Crimson Altar. 2 films that are nothing like each other at all. But the UK cut of Curse of the Crimson Altar specifically has a bit of library music that when I first heard it, I was like, wait a minute. Oh, okay. It's Monty Python. Makes sense. No. But yeah, I wouldn't imagine anybody daring to use the Plan 9 library music at this point.
I think you want to hear like crazy use of library music, or actually music that they're stealing is a Chinese Kung Fu Shaw Brothers movies. You hear John Williams, Bernard Herrmann, you hear all kinds of music in those crazy movies.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's a lot of fun to, I know that song. I know that clip. I was wondering if you guys, talking about movies that are so bad that they're good, have you guys seen The Room or The Disaster Artist, a more modern Ed Wood style movie?
I have not, but Scott, didn't you see at least one of those?
I have seen both of them, actually. And I've only seen The Room once, what I'll call straight. The other time I saw it was hosted by Riff Tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the theater when The Disaster Artist came out. My wife had actually read the book that it's based on.
Yeah, I read the book and saw that movie. I have not seen The Room yet. I've seen a lot of clips from it, and I want to see it. But to me, when I watched and read the story and saw the movie, The Disaster Artist, it really gave, again, that look at a person, no talent whatsoever, but he had enough money and enough sincerity, and he said, I want to make a movie, and he made a movie. I think that's what we see in Ed Wood. And I really, really appreciated the end of the movie when they're actually watching the movie. How true it was, or I don't know. But, everyone, he was there like, this is a serious movie I made. But everyone's just seeing how funny it was. And everyone's laughing. And his friend says, they're laughing with the movie, at the movie, but with the movie. And he kind of grasps that idea. And I don't know if Ed Wood ever got that sense that I think it's sad that he did not see how famous his movies became.
I think the scene that you're referring to in The Disaster Artist is, I really think the filmmaker in Tommy Wiseau, he realized that he made something that entertained people. It may not have been what he wanted, but he realized that it entertained, so that fulfilled his desire to make the movie. Mm-hmm. I hope Ed Wood got that feeling, but I kind of doubt it, because I'm not sure the movie became all that well known or very popular in some circles until after his death.
Yes, I think that's a sad part, but I think a movie like The Disaster Artist or The Room and other films like it that Riff Tracks and the Mystery Science Theater guys, they get a hold of. I've been watching a lot of their things, and I think they're still making these bad movies even into the 2000s. But and that's the thing. I think the entertainment quality is what really makes a movie good or not. It could be horribly made, but if it's entertaining, if it makes you laugh because it's horribly made, then to me that's a good movie. And I think when I saw The Disaster Artist, I got that sense too. It's like, this thing is absolutely terrible, but it's so terrible it's funny. And I would hope, and as you said, Tommy Wiseau got a sense that, well, I entertain people, that's good enough. Mm-hmm. I wish that Ed Wood would have had that same sense while he was alive.
Yeah, Plan 9 from Outer Space kind of floated around in obscurity. It turned up on TV every once in a while, but it wasn't until the 1980 book, the Golden Turkey Awards, that it really started to get a little bit more attention. And by that point, Ed Wood had already passed. He had passed away in, 78? So it's unfortunate. It's one of those things where I feel like he would have been encouraged and buoyed by knowing that his movies are so enjoyable, whether people call them so bad they're good, like you just did, Kenny, or so many other people, or people just talk about how they like watching them and get riffed or whatever. People are enjoying this film, and that's why we wanted to talk about it on a Movies by Minute style podcast, just to kind of look at it and give it some respect, but still have fun at the same time. And I feel like this movie is probably the most iconic of the Ed Wood movies for that reason.
Now, all I know is if he had been around today, he would be working for the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh, yeah. I find those movies difficult to watch, those asylum movies, but I could sense that they're having fun doing that.
Sure.
and he would be perfect in that environment.
Yes.
And he would get more money.
Yeah.
So
and he probably shot pretty quick too, which, is an important part of those movies that end up on Sci-Fi anyway, right? Yeah. Quick turnaround, low budget, but still more money than Ed Wood probably ever saw. And let's go. And he has a troupe of actors around him already, of varying degrees of talent, including Dr. Tom Mason. Man, I want to know more about that guy.
Maybe he might have passed, but maybe we can get his daughter or son at a convention. Wouldn't that be great?
There we go. We all need to start emailing Ron at Monster Bash about tracking this guy down. Or something like that. Yeah. Is there anything else we want to make sure we talk about when we talk about this segment, this Plan 4 of the Plan 9 from Outer Space film?
I think I got all my points in.
Yep, me too.
Well, apart from that whole, I never noticed the picture changing thing before, I feel like I've said everything I really need to say.
You better not edit that out.
Oh, I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it in there. I'm going to leave it in there. And that's part of the fun of this stuff, and that's part of the reason why I wanted Scott as my permanent co-host on this and why we partnered up on this, is he's got a more Riff Tracks, MST3K background when it comes to movies like this versus what I bring to the table, which is not that. So, the back and forth with Scott and I, and then bringing in somebody like you who also has such love for this movie, I think is what's making the Plan 9 by 9 podcast special, at least to me. I can't speak for the listeners, the 33 people in the back that don't have time for me to get all distracted. For me, this has been fun.
Yes, I'm enjoying it and can't wait to hear the whole Plan 9 and see what you're going to do to your next. I hope this continues. We could have, I was thinking the 7 minutes of Sinbad be a good one.
Ooh. Well, Scott and I have talked. We have plans, but we probably shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. We have 5 more parts of this film to talk about. I think I've said it in a previous episode. I'm going to go ahead and say it again here. Stay tuned. Scott and I have had long conversations about what the next movie will be when we wrap up Plan 9 by 9 and decide to do another Movies by Minute style podcast. And while we were at the most recent Monster Bash convention, Scott and I sat down and recorded a little bit for Monster Kid Radio and announced what that movie will be. So stay tuned.
And Derek, before we sign off, I'm not going to sign off this podcast until you're safely locked inside.
Well,
and I want to say this. You guys have been really nice, so I'm going to go and lock my side door.